The New York Mets lost 7-0 against the Padres on Tuesday night, but no one cares about that game because the real story of the night was that Pete Alonso and Starling Marte each exited the game with injuries. Pete got hit in the hand. Early x-rays are negative, but the Mets aren't out of the woods yet with that. Starling Marte has a quad injury. They're going to have to get imaging on. So this is going to be a huge test for this team if these guys miss significant time. I'm going to talk about that throughout the show today. And also, I will give you a little bit of a game recap at the end as the Mets did get blown out in this one. And we'll talk a little bit more about what they can do to close out this series with a victory. All of that coming on this edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, I wanted to open the show today talking about these injuries because honestly, it's more important than a game where the Mets just really didn't show much of fight. And really, I think the injuries maybe colored the Mets play in some respects because when you see two players go down, particularly of the magnitude of a Starling Marte and a Pete Alonso, it's tough to get back from that. And Pete Alonso is obviously the worst player that could possibly get hurt. Now, right now, the Mets aren't out of the woods, but the first x-rays on his hand, he got hit by a pitch, came back negative for a fracture. But as we've seen in the past with hand and wrist injuries in particular, the first x-ray could be negative and the next day you could find out that the bone is fractured, right? There's no guarantee that he's going to come out of this completely okay. It's great that the first test was good, but this is still a evolving story here with Pete Alonso. And I think outside of Francisco Lindor, he is the most indispensable player on this team. I think Lindor's value is a little bit greater. We see that in his wins above replacement, but also I just think when you're talking about the type of a shortstop that Lindor is, that premium position, I think at times we really forget the defensive value that these guys bring. And having a shortstop like Lindor out there for 27 outs, that's huge for this team. So the fact that he was able to avoid more of an injury with that finger and is able to play through it, that has been huge for this Mets team. The same could hopefully be said when we find out what happens with Pete Alonso. Hopefully he can play through it because there's really no one on this roster that could give the power that Pete Alonso provides to this team. You look in the minor leagues and Mark Vientos is maybe the one name on this entire 40-man roster that you would look towards to be able to fill that type of a hole. But even Vientos is on the injured list in the minor leagues right now. So that's not a quick solution. When you look at the options for the Mets, in the short term, it's going to be a lot of JD Davis. I'd imagine he's playing some first base. Recently he's got to start there to begin this series when Pete asked the DH for a day and then wanted to have JD's bat in the lineup against the lefties. So they had him go out there at first. It hasn't looked great, but it hasn't looked horrible just yet. He ended up playing the rest of this game for Pete Alonso after he exited. So that is your early move because Starling Marte could potentially be out too. That almost eliminates Mark Canha as a candidate to start at first base. I think if you had Marte, the solution would be pretty simple. You would go with Jeff McNeil in left field, Louis Guillorme starting every day at second base, Eduardo Escobar at third, Lindor at short, Canha at first. You'd have Nimmo and Marte in the outfield. Your team would be pretty solid, except for, of course, missing Alonso's massive bat. I think that this is a Mets team that when I almost called him Mark Scherzer. When Max Scherzer went down, everyone was immediately saying the season was over. This team wouldn't be able to figure it out. They couldn't hang on without him. And we've seen them respond really well to that injury. So I think that this is a Mets team that I will not count out at all under any circumstance right now with the way they've been playing. They're playing a team branded baseball. It's not all about one guy. With that said, Pete Alonso is the heart of this team in a lot of ways. And I really think that the performance that we saw tonight after he went out maybe indicates that a little bit. Now they might have to rally around him in a different way, but when you lose that leader, the guy that has played every single game this year, Lindor missed one. Now Alonso almost definitely misses one. I think best case scenario, they give him the final game of this series off against the Padres. You got a day off on Thursday. The best case scenario is that he's back in the lineup on Friday. But if they have to go without him for a significant amount of time, it's going to be really tough. And I think also from a personal aspect, when it comes to Alonso, you do think about the RBI lead he has, the home run lead, the fact that he could start an all-star game, play in the home run derby again. All these things that he could miss out on if this injury is significant, that's really frustrating. But just as a team, as a whole, without him, it's not going to be easy to make up for that production. I think the Mets can maybe spackle together something, but really it's going to come down to getting somebody else to step up who has yet to really show that they can do that over extended run this season. So that's going to be Dominic Smith. He's the most obvious person to talk about right now. Since going down to Syracuse, he's played 3 games. He's 4 for 14 with a homer, a double, and I think 2 or 3 RBIs. But he has only played 3 games down there, and he was just demoted for a reason. So if Alonso's out, obviously he's going to get called back up. He's going to get significant playing time, and I think Dom could rise to that challenge, but he hasn't given us any evidence this year on the field that he'll be able to rise to that challenge. If you want to talk about some other potential solutions, I already mentioned Mark Vientos. If his injury isn't significant, he's on a 7-day IL right now. Maybe he ends up coming up and he can provide a spark for an extended period of time. But that's asking a ton of a rookie to say, hey, come up and beat Pete Alonso for us. Not to mention, it's not like he has a ton of experience at first base either. So defensively, I think there would probably be some concerns. I don't know if he'd be any worse than JD Davis over there, but that's just another thing to mention. Another guy to talk about is Daniel Palka. I think if we're talking about short-term stopgap, let's just say Pete goes on the IL for 2 weeks, right? Palka is someone the Mets could call up just to add another bopper where I don't even know how much playing time he would necessarily get. But if you didn't want to disrupt whatever you got going on with Dominic Smith in AAA, you could go to Palka. And Palka does have 10 home runs to lead the Syracuse Mets. I've talked about him a lot throughout the year. Someone that I really do think will be up with this team at some point for a 2-week stretch. And I think he can be one of these folk heroes that can have his moments like a Travis Blankenhorn did last year, or Jose Peraza, or Brandon Drury. I do think Palka could have a little bit of juice to him. He's currently on a 7-game hitting streak. So if he is hot, maybe add him to the 40 and call him up and see what you had there. He can play the outfield. He can play some first base for you. On the year, he's in 241 in Syracuse with a 335 on base and a 463 slugging percentage. Those are your options, though. And so without Pete Alonso, really the onus is more on everybody else around him to step up. Eduardo Escobar has just gotten hot. You need to see that continue. JD Davis, same thing. You need professional at-bats as you've been getting from Mark Canha, Jeff McNeil, Brandon Nimmo, Louis Guillorme. All these guys will be in the lineup every day, and you're going to need a lot from them. That's also why I do think that you could maybe see the Mets venture into the trade market. I talked about a Wilson Contreras trade a couple of weeks ago. I still think that could be on the table. That would add another bat to your lineup. We'll see what happens. I think the Mets are going to do what they've done so far this year. They'll be patient with all of this. Hopefully, Pete Alonso's injury is not significant. We find that out tomorrow, and you don't have to worry about any of this. But if it is significant, I think the Mets will let this West Coast trip play out. They'll promote somebody, whether that's Palka or Dominic Smith, and they'll try to get through this. And then if they have to make a move, they'll have to make a move because you can't let the Braves really get back into this mix. So a lot to think about right now. And I actually think that even though Pete Alonso is the more significant player, I have a feeling that Starling Marte could have the more significant injury. I'll tell you why in just a minute. But if you would like to build the engagement ring of her dreams, check out BlueNile.com. Whether you're ready to pop the question or if you're just celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her with modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. Blue Nile has simple online tools that let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as setting style. Blue Nile's bench jewelers will then handcraft her perfect engagement ring. Each ring is one of a kind. Or if you're celebrating life special moments with fine jewelry outside of just an engagement, you can go to Blue Nile and they have jewelry experts on hand 24/7 who are available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Mets listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive does include engagement. Use the code Locked On. Again, that's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece by going to BlueNile.com today. Now, Starling Marte has a quad injury. Right now, just described as quad tightness, but he needs to get imaging to see the severity of that injury. We really have no idea. Could just be day-to-day, slight tweak. Could be a grade 1 strain where it hits the IL. Could be a grade 3 strain where it's like Max Scherzer and suddenly you have to think about life without Starling Marte for a couple of months. Really no way of knowing. I'm not entirely surprised that one of these injuries has popped up. Starling Marte throughout his career has never really been a 150 game player. He's only eclipsed 150 games played once. Usually you're looking more at 135 to 140 games played a year. So I always expected there to be at least one IL stint with Starling Marte where he might tweak something and be out of the lineup for a little bit. Maybe this is that injury and maybe it's not too significant, but you'll lose him for 2 weeks and then you have to get by and hopefully he comes back soon after that and is healthy and can play the entire second half. But when it comes to injuries of this nature, the tissue type injuries, the quad, a hamstring, any of these types of things, it could be lingering and it could be something he deals with for the remainder of the season. So you want to make sure that you play this right and you don't want to force him out there too soon. You don't want to really play through it. You want to make sure that injury heals. And without him, the Mets have to figure out what to do with their outfield. And I think that they're okay in the outfield, but it's exacerbated if Pete Alonso is not out there because now, it's a little bit more pressure on a JD Davis to play the field defensively. It's more pressure on Jeff McNeil to be in the outfield and to have Louis Guillorme out there every day, even against lefties. It's just all around more pressure on all these guys to step up. And when it comes to the outfield construction, I do think that the most obvious solution would be to play Jeff McNeil in left and have Brandon Nimmo in center and have Mark Canha in right. Nick Plummer will certainly get a fair share of time as well, but I could actually see Plummer maybe being the DH in this situation. You want to keep that outfield defense a little bit better with McNeil out there. I think McNeil is still a better outfielder than Nick Plummer is. That's why you saw tonight who was starting in left. It was McNeil. Plummer was the DH. So I could see that continuing with JD Davis playing first base if Alonso's out. Assuming Alonso is healthy, if that non-fracture holds up through the following imaging and it just turns out to be some swelling that can come down and by the weekend he's back in the lineup starting at first base, then I think you're able to manage the loss of Starling Marte a little bit easier. But when it comes to other outfielders, you're kind of tapped out. I mean, the Mets didn't have a ton of depth when it came to their outfield anyway. You have Jake Mangum up in AAA playing really well, and he exited the game the other day with an injury. So now Mangum's hurt. Don't know how long he'll be out. Travis Jankowski is nowhere close to a return. You already have Plummer up. Khalil Lee is another option, and he is starting to hit. But, I mean, his season has been terrible as a whole. It just finally turned around about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago when he started to figure out. They sent him down to was it low A or I think they might have sent him down to St. Lucie or maybe it was high A to Brooklyn. I mean, they sent him all the way down from AAA to try to figure out that swing, and it worked. He has gotten hot. He's been red hot over the last week in particular, but are you going to throw him into the fire when he's been so bad as a whole this season? I don't know. If not him, then who? You look at Jonas Fargas as someone who hasn't hit at all this year either, but at least he brings you glove and defense, and he's a right-handed bat that could replace a Starling Marte. there's just slim pickings when it comes to where the Mets can go. You can go back to Daniel Palka as another option I already mentioned. I think that he has a very similar skill set to a Nick Plummer when it comes to being, left-handed power bat, not a ton of defense in the outfield, but you could go that route. Again, assuming that it is a serious injury or that you need to get somebody, but I really don't know here. I mean, there's really just nothing. Nothing that you can look at in the minor leagues to say, all right, there's a starter that can come up in place of a Marte. That guy is Nick Plummer. So maybe it's Nick Plummer. Maybe it's Jeff McNeil getting more time out in the outfield. And then obviously Dominic Smith. It's really the answer, I think, to all of this. The bottom line is with this Mets team, you could throw Dom in left field too if you wanted to. He's the major leaguer. He struggled a lot this season. I thought that the demotion was warranted. But if you're telling me that you're going to lose Starling Marte and Pete Alonso from your major league roster, I don't know how you could keep Dom Smith in AAA. I don't think you can. I think you got to call him up. And the onus is on him. I'm sure he didn't appreciate getting sent down in the minors. And this could be an opportunity for him to prove that he is a major leaguer and prove that he should never go down again. So I would not be surprised at all if we saw Dom Smith back with a big league club as soon as Wednesday night. Or if not, in LA against the Angels. And then you'll see where you go from there. But a really disappointing night. Now we basically just wait and see what the MRIs suggest on Wednesday with these two guys. But this Mets team is going to have to show that grit that they've had all year and continue that as they're battling some real adversity. The good news is maybe the rotation heals up while the position player core starts to go down. Tyler McGill looks to be heading towards a return this weekend. That's a good sign. Jacob deGrom maybe comes back at the end of this month. But in the meantime, this lineup that has been carrying the team just lost two key cogs. I want to talk a little bit about the game tonight, which really there's not much to discuss as the Mets got destroyed 7-0. But I'll go through what they have to do to finish off this series against the Padres, maybe get a win heading into their weekend series against the Angels. But BetOnline is your number one source for all of your betting stats and sports info. Find the latest sports developments, news, and odds, including this year's basketball championship matchup, the NHL Hockey Conference Finals, Major League Baseball, and of course, all the latest fighting news from MMA and UFC to boxing. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So really not much to discuss when it comes to the Mets game tonight on the field. They only had 2 hits. Mark Canha broke up a no-hitter in the 6th inning, if I'm not mistaken. Yu Darvish was great for the Padres. 7 innings pitch, allowed those 2 hits, 6 strikeouts, no walks, lowering his season ERA to 3.61. Taijuan Walker for the Mets was not good. Went 6 innings, give him credit for that, but allowed 5 hits, 4 earned runs, 2 walks, 4 strikeouts, gave up a homer. His ERA went up to 3.28 with this outing. I tweeted this out too, but my dad tells me, he's like, hey, it's your fault. It's your fault that Taijuan Walker blew up, because if you've been listening to the show recently, I've talked about how Taijuan Walker's low strikeout numbers and some of the advanced metrics have been a little bit glaring to point towards regression at some point. We saw a very similar trend happen last season where he got by with smoke and mirrors, was an all-star, comes out of the break, and suddenly the home runs started flying and his season really tailed off. So I'm not shocked to see this type of a bad outing. You got to give him credit for fighting through and giving the Mets 6 innings through 103 pitches, 67 strikes. But it's something to monitor because, again, I mean, tonight, 4 strikeouts, one of his better strikeout performances, but he was facing more batters. He was facing batters with traffic. So he was trying to pitch around him, trying to get those strikeouts. And for the season, it's just been markedly low to see his strikeout rate just really tail off a cliff compared to even what it was last season. So we'll see what he looks like moving forward. Colin Holderman did not look great either. His first really bad outing, gave up 3 earned runs, only recorded a single out. Chasen Shreve was actually the only pitcher that threw the ball well tonight, getting 5 outs, walking one but not allowing a single hit. He also didn't strike out a batter either. He's got a 3.86 ERA on this season. Like I said, offensively, though, there's really nothing to talk about. 2 hits as a team. Did not draw a single walk either, which is a rarity for this Mets lineup. Final game of this series. This is the time that Chris Bassitt has to put behind his last couple of starts and win a series for the Mets in a rubber match. He is obviously capable of doing so. He's going to go against his former teammate, Sean Nile, who has a 3.77 ERA in the season. Left-handed pitcher. You lose Pete, most likely. I'd be stunned if Pete Alonso is back in the lineup tomorrow. So you're looking at your lineup without Pete going against a lefty. JD Davis likely at first base. I don't even know what they're doing. I'm sitting here trying to think. I guess it depends on who gets the call up, but they're really left-handed right now. Guillorme probably has to be in the lineup. They've rested him against lefties a lot this year, so he'll probably be out there. Jeff McNeil will be out there against the lefty. Brandon Nimmo's been great against lefties this year, so obviously he'll be in the lineup. You got Mark Cann as a ready. You got JD Davis as a ready. You got Eduardo Escobar and Lindor as switch hitters. And I'd imagine Tomas Nido is back in the lineup after Mazika started tonight. But not the best offensive lineup you'd like going into a rubber match game. I think the Mets are certainly capable of winning it, but Chris Bassitt has to be much better than he's been. Bassitt can deliver for this Mets team, and they can get a couple runs across. They can escape San Diego with a win. And if you tell me, considering Francisco Lindor slammed his finger in a hotel room, they started off the West Coast trip 0-2. Pete Alonso and Starling Marte both go down. The Mets find a way to win on Wednesday night, and they end up going into the final leg of this West Coast trip, 4-3 through the first 7 games, about to face a team in the Angels who have not been great this year. They just lost 12 in a row. They just fired their manager, which if you're looking at the Phillies, apparently that means they won't lose for the next 4 or 5 games because a managerial change can just somehow spark a team. So I think things are lining up in a bad way in some respects for the Mets when it comes to that weekend series, but I'm not just going to look on superstitions and base my entire analysis on what will happen this weekend, just judging on the fact that the Angels are due to win a game. Right now, it's 5-5, top of the 8th, Angels versus Red Sox. So we'll see if they maybe can get a win tonight and at least break that streak. But the Mets are a team that has proven time after time that you should count on them because they've come through. So at this point, as a Mets fan, I'm telling all of you out there listening, have some faith in this team. Don't let go of the rope just because it looks bad right now. Have some patience also, and don't worry too much. We'll find out what the deal is with these injuries. And I think this is a Mets team that can adjust on the fly and continue to find a way to win games. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's next over the coming days here. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB, hosted by Paul Francis Sullivan. Locked On MLB is where you want to go to stay today with everything going on in Major League Baseball. You can follow Locked On MLB wherever you get podcasts.